let's study in detail about these conic sections. Like, how do we get a conic section? Then we'll look into circles. All right. Now, okay, let's start with a very simple logic. Fine. Let's assume that you are going to have one line. Okay, so assume that you have a line, some line like this. Okay. Now, what you do, you take another line which is at a particular angle to this line. Okay, some angle. In the sense, let's assume that you have another line which is somewhere along this way. So assume that this is second line. Okay, so assume that this is the second line. Now what I want you to understand is that you see that blue color line, right? The second line. Now this particular line, assume that you're rotating about this black color line. In the sense, imagine, see, if this is the black colored line and if this is the blue colored line. So okay, you have two lines like this, and what you're doing, you're rotating this one. So you're rotating basically like this. Okay, so you're rotating this way. So when you rotate this way, what you're going to get is a cone, correct? In the sense, here what you'll end up with is you're going to end up with a cone. So you're going to something like this. You'll have one here, and the same thing is going to be down also. But what is important is from here you're going to get a line like this, and here you're going to get another cone. See, basically what you have, two, one top cone, one bottom cone. You have two cones, correct? Now, the point where both of them are intersecting, we call this as the vertex. Okay, this is called as the vertex. Let's call it as V. All right. Now, you have two lines. One is a fixed line, correct? Now, that fixed line, we call this line as axis. Okay, so one is an axis, one more is a moving line, or what we call as the generating line, because that generates the cone, isn't it? So we call that as the generating line. In the sense, here this one is called as the generating line. Now once you have generating line and the axis and the vertex, and these are the three major parameters what we have in creating a cone. Now once you have a cone, I can cut the cone in different ways. Okay, many ways we can cut the cone. Now in this case, assume that you have a cone, right? Say you are going to cut the cone horizontally. Like, all of you imagine a cone. Okay, so imagine you have a cone. You're going to cut the cone horizontally like this. In the sense, in this case, assume that we are going to cut the cone like this. Okay, when you cut it, the cross section, what you're going to get is a circle, isn't it? So that means you're going to get a circle like this. So cross section of a cone can give me a circle. One shape is done. Second shape, imagine you have a cone again. Instead of cutting it horizontally, parallel to the base of the cone, assume that you're going to cut in a particular angle. Okay, so assume that you're going to cut it something like this. That means here, how we are going to cut? So assume that you're going to cut something like this. See, you're going to cut something like this. Now, this if you cut, you won't get a circle, but you're going to get an oval shape, correct? See, like this, it's circle. Like this, if you cut, you're going to get some oval shaped figure, correct? So that oval shaped figure, something like this. This is what we call as an ellipse. Second type. Now, see, any of these figures, if you look at it, these two are closed figures because you have a starting and an ending point. What if I'm going to cut the cone in a different fashion? In the sense, what if I cut it in such a way that it keeps on extending? In the sense, what if we are going to cut this particular curve, as in the cone, something like this one. Imagine I'm going to cut it like this. Imagine, in the sense, again, assume a cone. You cut one part of the cone sideways. what shape are you going to get? You are going to get a shape something like this, what we call as a parabola. Now, assume that we are going to cut one more, which is going to be something like this. Top, bottom, both the parts. That means you are going to get pair of lines, correct? Not lines, pair of curves, isn't it? That means that basically will look something like this. One on top, one on the bottom. This is what we call as hyperbola. Clear? So let's just, combine all of them together along with the cone now. See, we have a cone, correct? Now, the vertex of the cone, this is V, isn't it? Now here, see, the cones, the lines can extend. Only a part of the cone is what we are looking at. And again, I'm telling you, the cone can also extend to however small or however big it can. Now, in this case, so what we are trying to do, first, assume that you're going to cut it like this, horizontally. So what you are going to get is a circle. Correct? This is one. Now, the next thing, assume that you are going to cut it something like this. See, something like this. In a cross, in an oblique way. So what you're going to get is you're going to get something like this, what we call as an ellipse. Okay, that's an ellipse, an oval shaped figure. Now the next one, so assume that you're going to cut something like this, one part of it. So you're going to get a figure something like this, what we call as a parabola. Okay, and then finally assume that you're going to cut it something like this. So assume you're going to cut it like this, top and the bottom. That means you're going to get one on top like this, one in the bottom like this. We call this as a hyperbola. Now these four figures are what we call as conic sections in general. Okay, they are called as conic sections. Now, whenever we talk about the conic sections, there is one more parameter which differentiate between an ellipse and a circle. Because think about it, you have a circle, you extend it, you'll get an ellipse. Or take an ellipse, you compress it, you're going to get a circle. So, what parameter defines and what parameter differentiates a circle and an ellipse? And what parameter differentiates a hyperbola and a parabola? We are going to understand and we are going to learn about all these things in detail from the next video onwards.